We're back with our second installment of Climate and Coffee Conversations with Dr. Marisa Gervais, Associate Professor of Meteorology and Atmospheric Science here at Penn State. And 'tis the season, the holidays are here, and it's time for some of us to gather with family and friends. So we're going a little bit off the science tonight, and I'm just curious, at the family dinner table, if the topic of climate change comes up, how do we approach it?
Yeah, so I think this is a big question. So we'll probably spend some time chatting about this. And I don't know that I have the perfect answer. Every family is really different. And so I think, how you have conversations with your family will really depend on how your family is and what your dynamic is. I think whenever the topic of climate change comes up, there's kind of these 5 main take-home messages to remember, key facts. 1, it's real. 2, it's us. It is because we've been putting carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. 3, experts agree. 97% of climate experts agree that climate change is happening and it's caused by humans. 4, it's bad. It's not a nothing burger. This isn't, this is something we do have to really care about, and we do have to work really hard to mitigate against. And then 5, there is hope. There are things that we can do to help mitigate the problem, adapt, etc. So there are action items. And I think those 5 things are things that we always want to bring up and keep in mind when we're thinking about climate change.
So my guess is we don't want to be argumentative, but how do we go about finding common ground with those around us?
Yeah, so actually, when it comes to climate change communication and discussion, finding common ground and having something in common with the person you're talking to is actually the most important thing. I could sit here and tell you facts about climate change over and over and over again, but actually probably you talking to your family members is probably the most effective thing that you can do. And so the nice thing is with your family, I hope you already have a lot of common ground, right? You have a lot of things that you care about in common. Maybe it's where you're from, what's happening in your local community. Maybe it's kids and grandkids. You have a lot in common already. Now, in terms of actual things that can find common ground, there are some things that we know across the political spectrum that a lot of people agree on. So in terms of policies for things that we can enact, one of them is making buildings more energy efficient and having, rebates, et cetera, to help accomplish this. 2 is funding research into renewable energy sources, solar, wind power. This is becoming increasingly available to us, and furthering our research on that and making sure that we have that available is something that a lot of people agree on. And finally, another third one is tax rebates for energy efficient vehicles and solar panels. So those types of policies, a lot of people agree on. So if you want something that you can talk about that maybe isn't so, that's a little bit easier to kind of navigate, I think talking about some of those solutions could be really good avenues to start with.
What is something you shouldn't do at the dinner table?
Yeah, so I think whenever you're having a conversation with someone, it's always important to recognize and be respectful of each other. And so understanding that people come with different perspectives. I think when it comes to climate change, it's well known and documented that it's a very challenging thing to accept. And it's a really challenging thing to accept because number one, the greenhouse gases that we emit are invisible to us. So we can't see it in the way that we can see some other things. 2, we might be emitting in one location, but we might be feeling the effects somewhere else. We could also be emitting now, and we feel the effects later. And so it's not an immediate impact. So that's really hard to understand. 3, some aspects of it are really complicated, and they can be really hard to understand. And some of those are the things that are our impacts that we really feel as people, especially in terms of the impact on weather, daily weather. And it can be really hard to understand that. I think a last thing that makes it really hard is that the changes that we need to make can cause some short-term economic pain. And you have to be looking out for the long term. Kind of think about it like buying insurance. or saving for retirement. It can be really hard to think to do those things, but they're necessary, and we know that they're necessary, and so that all of those things can make it a very challenging topic.
So those were all really good points, but I think all of us may have that family member that says, oh, well, it snowed a foot in my yard yesterday. There is no climate change. How do you deal with that sort of statement?
Yeah, so just because we generally expect an increase in temperatures, it doesn't mean we're not still going to have winter and summer. We'll still have seasons. So on average, it'll get warmer. On average, you could maybe think about this as winter's getting shorter, et cetera. It doesn't mean we're not going to have winter.
So it sounds like you're talking about the difference between weather versus climate. Can you expand on that?
Yes, so weather is the daily weather that we experience. You can think about this as like rolling a dice, right? We might get a 2. If we roll 2 dice together, 2 ones make a 2. Or we're probably more likely to get a 7, right? When it comes to climate, climate is the odds that we get a 7 versus a 2. So it's the mean of all the daily weather. Even if we load that dice and we make it more likely to get higher numbers, it doesn't mean you're not going to get a 2 sometimes. And so we still expect to have cold events that happen. In fact, I study cold events. The fact that 97% of experts agree, we do have to rely on our experts.
Okay, well, thank you very much for those words of wisdom as we head into the holiday season. Cheers to Dr. Marisa Gervais and to all of you as we enter these times with family and friends. And we'll be back in a moment with more.